Ethan Ward had planned the hike weeks ago, though he couldn't remember why anymore. Maybe it had been the silence in the kitchen that morning, or the way Lucas had said, "Have fun," without looking up from his phone. Whatever the reason, he told himself he needed space. Fresh air, quiet, perspective, those were the words he'd used. But as his boots met the damp earth of the trail, the truth pressed heavier than the pack on his shoulders. He wasn't escaping work. He was escaping the hollow rhythm of a marriage that had forgotten how to breathe. The forest was still wet from the night's rain. A thin mist clung to the pines, softening their outlines until the world looked slightly out of focus. Ethan liked it that way, edges blurred, colors muted. He walked with steady, deliberate steps, his breath clouding the air, his mind replaying fragments of life with Lucas, the first apartment, the laughter that used to fill their mornings, the quiet dinners that replaced it. Love hadn't vanished, he told himself. It had just gone quiet. A bird darted between branches ahead, startling him out of thought. He paused, raising his camera, but the shot came out wrong, too dark, too distant. He sighed and adjusted the lens, muttering, "Story of my life." His voice sounded strange against the hush of the woods. By noon, he reached a fork in the trail. The map in his pocket was damp, half-torn at the crease. He squinted at it, trying to recall which path led toward the ridge. A soft crunch behind him broke his concentration. He turned sharply. A man emerged from between the trees, tall, sun-browned, a camera swinging loosely from his neck. "Didn't mean to startle you," the stranger said with an easy smile. "I thought I was the only one out here." Ethan's first instinct was distance. He returned a polite nod. "Guess we both needed a little solitude." The man chuckled. "Name's Cole. You heading to the ridge?" "Yeah. Or trying to," Ethan replied, glancing at the soggy map. Cole stepped closer, studying it. "You're holding it upside down." Ethan blinked, then laughed, a short, embarrassed sound that escaped before he could stop it. Cole grinned wider, the kind of grin that made it impossible not to smile back. "Come on," Cole said. "I've been up there before. Mind some company?" Ethan hesitated. He'd come out here to be alone, not guided. But something in Cole's tone was disarming, casual yet confident, like he belonged wherever he stood. "Sure," Ethan said finally. "Lead the way." They walked in companionable silence at first. Cole's stride was unhurried, his gaze always shifting, toward the play of light through branches, the texture of moss on stone. Ethan found himself watching him more than the trail. There was an ease in the way Cole moved, a quiet assurance that made Ethan aware of how tense his own shoulders were. "So," Cole said after a while, "what brings you out here?" Ethan answered without thinking. "Needed to clear my head." "Rough week?" "Rough year," Ethan said before he could filter it. Then, softer, "Marriage stuff." Cole didn't press. He only nodded, the air between them tightening for a moment before easing again. "Nature's good for that," he said. "It doesn't ask questions." They kept walking, the path narrowing as it climbed. Conversation came in fragments, small facts, shared silences. Cole was a travel photographer, always between cities, chasing light more than stability. Ethan admitted he worked in design, tied to screens and deadlines. "So you make things," Cole said. "And I try to capture them before they disappear." The words lingered. Ethan wondered what it would be like to live that way, untethered, unafraid of change. By late afternoon, the trees began to thin, revealing a stretch of golden sky. They reached the overlook just as the sun dipped toward the horizon. Below, the valley unfurled in muted greens and silver mist. Ethan exhaled softly. "I'd forgotten it looked like this." Cole raised his camera. "Stand there," he said, motioning toward the edge. Ethan frowned. "I'm not much of a model." "Doesn't matter. It's not about you, it's about the moment." Still, when Cole lifted the camera, Ethan straightened unconsciously, light brushing his face. The shutter clicked once. Cole lowered the lens and smiled. You look like someone who just remembered he's alive. Ethan laughed again, quieter this time, but genuine. The sound startled him, he hadn't heard it in months. For a heartbeat, the world felt suspended between dusk and night, between strangers and something else. As the last light faded, Cole said, "It'll be dark soon. There's a flat spot near the ridge where I usually camp. Safer than trying to go down in the dark." Ethan hesitated. "I was planning to head back. It's at least 2 hours downhill. You'll lose the trail in half that time." Cole gestured to the growing shadows. "Stay. One night. I've got a spare blanket." Ethan looked at the dimming sky, the uncertain path below. Logic said to accept. Caution whispered otherwise. Yet the idea of returning to silence, the same empty bed, the same restless thoughts, felt heavier than the risk of staying. "All right," he said finally. One night. They set up camp near a fallen log, the air cooling fast. Cole struck a small fire, coaxing the flame to life with practiced ease. Sparks danced upward into the dark. The smell of pine smoke mixed with the faint scent of coffee from Cole's flask. "Here," Cole said, passing it over. "It's not great, but it's warm." Ethan took a sip. The bitter heat burned his throat in a comforting way. "Better than anything I've had all week." Cole's eyes flicked to him, unreadable in the firelight. "Then it's doing its job." They talked until words ran out, about roads they hadn't taken, places they might never see. Cole told a story about photographing a storm in Arizona. Ethan listened, imagining the rush of wind, the thrill of capturing something wild. When the conversation waned, they sat quietly, watching the flames shrink. The forest around them settled into steady rhythm, wind sighing through branches, distant call of an owl. Ethan lay back, staring up at the stars. The sky stretched infinite, unbroken. Somewhere beside him, Cole shifted, the faint rustle of fabric brushing against the ground. Ethan's thoughts turned to Lucas, what he might be doing, whether he'd even noticed his absence. Guilt flickered, small but persistent. And yet, lying there beneath a sky wider than anything he'd felt in months, Ethan couldn't deny the unfamiliar calm seeping into him. Cole spoke suddenly, voice low. "Funny, isn't it? You can walk miles away from everything and still not feel lost until you meet someone." Ethan turned his head toward him. Cole's face was shadowed, his expression unreadable. "Maybe that's when you realize you were lost all along," Ethan murmured. Their eyes met for a moment that felt longer than it should. Then Cole smiled faintly and looked back at the stars. Ethan exhaled, the tension in his chest both easing and tightening at once. He knew he'd crossed an invisible line just by letting that moment exist. The fire dimmed to embers. Above them, the night deepened into silence. Ethan closed his eyes, his final thought a quiet admission he wouldn't say aloud. "I wasn't looking for anyone. But something in me had already said yes." Alden's cottage stood at the edge of a sloping field, its windows glowing a soft amber that cut through the deepening dusk. Ethan slid from the horse with Alden's help, his legs unsteady from the ride and the long walk before it. The air carried the smell of pine and distant rain, an early warning of the storm rolling in from the hills. Alden guided the horse toward a small shelter beside the cottage, then returned with the same steady, grounded presence that had kept Ethan from unraveling on the road. "Come in," Alden said gently. "You look half frozen." Ethan nodded and stepped inside. The warmth rushed toward him like a blanket. The cottage was modest but inviting, rough wooden beams, a stone fireplace flickering with a lively flame, and shelves cluttered with books, maps, and small carved figures that looked handmade. Everything felt lived in, unpretentious, and strangely comforting. Alden hung his coat on a peg and gestured toward a cushioned chair. "Sit. I'll get you some tea." Ethan eased into the chair, letting the heat from the fire soak into him. The tension in his shoulders slowly dissolved, as though the cottage itself was urging him to breathe. When Alden returned with 2 steaming mugs, Ethan accepted his with murmured gratitude. "You're safe here," Alden said quietly. "Whatever's weighing on you, you don't have to talk about it unless you want to." That simple kindness nearly broke Ethan's composure. He wrapped both hands around the mug, staring at the rising steam. Thank you. I'm not used to people giving me space without demanding answers. Alden sat across from him, elbows resting loosely on his knees. Answers come when they're ready. He smiled gently. People don't. The words settled into Ethan's chest like a truth he'd been avoiding. For weeks, Daniel's changing behavior had left him feeling hollow, emotionally starved, yet too afraid to confront what might be waiting on the other side of honesty. Here, with Alden, the silence didn't suffocate him. It invited him to think. Ethan took a slow sip of tea. My friends and I, we've been arguing. They're frustrated with me. They think I'm shutting them out. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. Maybe they're right. Alden listened without interrupting, his expression open and patient. There's someone in my life, Ethan continued, someone I've been with for 3 years. Daniel. Lately he's felt distant. Distracted. And I can't tell if I'm imagining it or if something's really wrong. His voice thinned. I didn't want to talk about it today, so everything just exploded. Alden nodded slowly. It sounds like you've been carrying more than you should alone. Ethan swallowed. Maybe. Or maybe I'm overreacting. Your feelings aren't overreactions, Alden said. If something feels off, there's a reason. The simplicity of that statement startled Ethan. Daniel often brushed off Ethan's concerns, insisting he was overthinking, being sensitive, reading into things. Hearing someone validate him so effortlessly felt both soothing and unsettling. The cottage lights flickered as a low rumble shook the windowpanes. The storm was closer now. Ethan glanced at his phone lying on the side table. He still hadn't opened Daniel's message, expecting important news. Alden asked gently. Ethan shook his head. Just another apology, probably. Or an explanation that avoids explaining anything. He didn't realize how bitter he sounded until the words were out. Alden's voice softened. You don't have to look at it tonight. Ethan nodded but didn't reply. The truth was, he was terrified of the message. Terrified of what it might confirm. Terrified of being right. Alden leaned back in his chair. Mind if I ask something? Go ahead. Does Daniel make you feel heard? Ethan hesitated. He used to. He rubbed his thumb along the mug's rim. Lately it feels like he's always somewhere else. Talking to someone else. And every time I try to get close, he deflects. Alden's gaze lowered thoughtfully. That kind of distance doesn't happen without a cause. But you deserve honesty, whatever the cause is. The fire crackled, sending a soft glow across Alden's face. Ethan studied him for a moment, surprised by how calm he felt in his presence. There was no judgment, no pressure, only an understanding that felt effortless. You've been through something like this, Ethan said quietly. Alden exhaled, a slow, controlled release. Yeah. I was with someone for 2 years. Thought we'd build a life together. But they were already building a life with someone else. His eyes didn't harden when he said it, instead, a quiet resilience settled over his features. After that, I came out here. Needed a place where I could hear myself think again. Ethan lowered his gaze. I'm sorry. Don't be. It taught me to recognize what real care should feel like. Ethan didn't realize how intently he'd been listening until he felt his heartbeat shift, calmer, quieter, yet somehow fuller. There was something magnetic about Alden, something steady that contrasted sharply with the insecurity Daniel inspired. Lightning flashed outside, followed by a thunderclap that shook the small wooden frame of the cottage. Ethan flinched before catching himself. You can stay here tonight, Alden said. Storm's going to be rough. No sense going back out there. Ethan wasn't sure if he should accept. His friend still hadn't returned. Daniel's message still waited. Yet the thought of stepping back into the cold, into the uncertainty outside, felt wrong. Here, for the first time in weeks, he could breathe without feeling like he was drowning. Thank you, Ethan said softly. I think I should. Alden nodded once, satisfied. Good. I'll set up the guest room. As he stood, Ethan's phone buzzed again. Another message from Daniel, this one a voice note. Ethan didn't open it. He couldn't. While Alden moved to prepare the room, Ethan walked toward the window. Rain, fine and icy, began tapping against the glass. The storm clouds bunched tightly above the fields, turning the world outside into a swirling gray. Ethan closed his eyes, leaning his forehead gently against the cool pane. The weight in his chest pulsed, then released, as if the storm outside was drawing some part of it away. Behind him, Alden said quietly, "Room's ready." Ethan turned, offering a faint, grateful smile. "I appreciate everything." "You don't owe me anything," Alden replied. "Sometimes people just need a safe place to land." The words settled between them with a significance neither spoke aloud. Ethan felt it, an emerging bond, fragile yet undeniably real. He knew this night would change something, even if he didn't yet know what. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, the cottage felt like the calm at the center of everything Ethan had been unable to face. Ethan woke to the sound of the city humming outside his window, a low, constant pulse that seemed to mirror the restless thoughts in his mind. The previous week's interactions with Julian replayed over and over, each glance and casual touch taking on new weight in his mind. He had never expected a roommate to feel so complicated, so compelling. Something about Julian's presence was magnetic, pulling at parts of him he had long kept controlled and cautious. That morning, Julian emerged from the kitchen with his usual easy confidence, carrying a steaming mug of coffee. "Morning," he said casually, though the way he leaned against the doorframe made the word feel layered, intimate. "Didn't hear you up earlier. Sleep well?" "Yeah," Ethan replied, trying to keep his tone even. "Just a little restless." Julian smirked knowingly. "City noises, huh? Or maybe you've got something on your mind." Ethan felt his cheeks warm, unsure if Julian was teasing or reading him with a precision that made him slightly uncomfortable. "Maybe both," he said cautiously, taking a sip of coffee to hide the flush. Julian leaned forward slightly, eyes glinting with curiosity. "You've got that look," he said. "Like you're thinking about something personal." Ethan froze, realizing he had been lost in thought about the previous night, the small request Julian had made, the subtle tension it created between them. He hadn't told anyone about it, he wasn't even sure he could explain it to himself. Yet Julian's gaze seemed to peer straight through his carefully maintained defenses. "Maybe," Ethan said, attempting a neutral tone. "Just a lot on my mind." Julian's expression softened, just a fraction. "Hey, don't worry. I'm not trying to pry. But I have to admit. I feel like we're in this odd space. You know, roommates, friends, maybe something more complicated than that." The words hung in the air, a challenge wrapped in casual delivery. Ethan's pulse quickened. Something in him wanted to step back, maintain boundaries, preserve the sense of order he so valued, but another part, a quieter, more daring part, felt drawn forward. The next afternoon, Julian approached him with an unusual level of openness. "So, about yesterday," he began, voice low and conversational. "I wanted to ask you again, can you help me with something?" Ethan raised an eyebrow, curiosity tinged with caution. "Something like before?" Julian nodded. "Yeah, kind of. I need an honest second opinion, and I thought, well, maybe you could help." His eyes were steady, almost vulnerable beneath the playful exterior. "I promise, nothing crazy. Just a favor between roommates." Ethan hesitated, the memory of the previous request flooding back. The thought of closeness with Julian made his chest tighten, a mixture of excitement and uncertainty that was difficult to name. "All right," he said slowly. "I'll help." Julian's smile was quick, fleeting, but it carried a warmth that made Ethan feel both reassured and strangely exposed. "Thanks, Ethan. Seriously." From that point, their days took on a subtle but noticeable shift. Even mundane tasks, making coffee, organizing the living room, walking to the nearby convenience store, felt charged with an unspoken tension. Julian had a way of speaking to Ethan that made him hyper-aware of every movement, every glance. He noticed the way Julian's hand lingered briefly when passing a notebook, or how his laughter seemed intentionally close, brushing against the edges of familiarity in a way that blurred boundaries. Ethan also noticed Julian's secrets more acutely now. Texts that he glanced at briefly, quickly dismissed, but their urgency left him with questions. Small inconsistencies in Julian's explanations, just a friend, or nothing important, suggested hidden layers to his life that Ethan couldn't yet decode. Curiosity battled with caution inside him. Every day brought a mix of intrigue, concern, and an undeniable pull towards something he was only beginning to recognize in himself. One evening, as rain tapped lightly against the window, Julian appeared at the sofa where Ethan was reading. "You ever wonder about trust?" he asked suddenly, voice low. The question was casual, almost philosophical, but the way Julian looked at him made it feel intimate, challenging. "Trust?" Ethan repeated, unsure how to respond. Julian nodded. "Yeah, between people. Some things are easy to share, others, not so much. But you know, when you trust someone, it changes everything." Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine. He realized that he was thinking about more than just trust, about connection, desire, the possibility that his feelings for Julian were evolving faster than he was prepared to acknowledge. Their conversation ended with a silence that was heavy but not uncomfortable. Silence, in this apartment, had become a language of its own, speaking volumes about what was unsaid but strongly felt. Ethan knew that he was walking a line between curiosity and restraint, desire and ethical boundaries. And yet, he couldn't bring himself to step back. Days passed, and Ethan's awareness of Julian's subtle cues only deepened. A casual brush of the arm, a playful challenge in a conversation, a lingering look at the edge of a smile, they were small, seemingly innocent actions, yet they carried a weight he could not ignore. He found himself analyzing every word, every gesture, wondering if Julian's intentions were truly casual, or if there was something more beneath the surface. One night, while Julian was out briefly, Ethan noticed a text pop up on Julian's phone left on the counter. He hesitated, conflicted, but curiosity overcame caution. The message was brief, cryptic: "Can't wait to see you tonight. Keep it just between us." Ethan felt a pang of something he couldn't name, surprise, confusion, a strange ache of betrayal, or perhaps a warning of complexity yet to come. Julian's private life, once opaque and distant, now seemed tantalizingly close, pressing against the edges of Ethan's carefully maintained boundaries. By the end of the week, Ethan understood one thing clearly: life in this apartment would never be ordinary. Julian had a way of drawing him in, of twisting everyday moments into exercises of tension, curiosity, and unspoken possibility. There was a thrill in it, yes, but also a precariousness, a sense that every choice carried weight and consequence. As Ethan lay awake that night, the faint city lights shimmering through the window, he realized he was at a crossroads. He could retreat into the familiar, maintaining his walls and routines, or he could allow himself to step closer to Julian's orbit, where trust, desire, and hidden truths awaited. And though he did not yet know what the right choice was, he knew that by morning, the rhythm of the apartment, and his heart, would be irrevocably changed.